Right, let's start by looking at the directions, the rules, and then we will go to the questions one by one. So it says that there are exactly 3 recycling centers. Okay, the centers are center 1, center 2, and center 3. It says exactly 5 kinds of material are recycled at these recycling centers, and those are glass G, newsprint N, plastic P, T for tin, and W for wood. Now, just think of these by their first alphabets. Don't get into the entire word. It's going to get confusing, okay? It says then that each recycling center recycles at least 2 but not more than 3 of these kinds of material. Now, let's say you have 3 centers, okay? You have center 1, you have center 2, and you have center 3, okay? It says that it is not more than 3 and it is at least 2. So what does this mean? It means that it is either 2 or 3, right? It cannot be less than 2 and cannot be more than 3. So that means each one of the centers either has 2 or 3. Okay, so let me kind of make those spots in that case. So you know that for every center, there have got to be 2 compulsory spots, which I'll make with kind of black. Okay, and let me put one with kind of a lighter color to signify that, hey, this is kind of the optional one. Okay, this is the optional one. So you need to have 2 of these filled definitely, and you may have the third one filled, okay? That's what I mean by this diagram. Let us go ahead and read the rules. It says that any recycling center that recycles wood also recycles newsprint. So if there's W, there will be N. So just write this down, that whenever there is a W, there will also be N. Or you can kind of say that if there is N, there will be W, right? That's what it means. So you should remember that you will have these as a block in here. So let's just write this down by saying that maybe W and N are together. Let's just make a block out of it like this, okay? Or if you want, you can draw the block like this if that's easy. Just remember that it can be WN or NW, so you can also maybe draw an arrow like that, okay? Now, let's look at the next rule. The next rule says that every kind of material that center 2 recycles is also recycled at center 1. I need you to spend some time to understand this. It says that every kind of material recycled at center 2. So if something is recycled here, it is also recycled here. This is not the same as saying that everything recycled at center 1 is recycled at center 2. What is the difference? Let me tell you the difference. Look, when you say that everything at center 2 is recycled at center 1, it means that, hey, center 1 definitely has what is recycled at center 2, and it may have something else too. It may not. So either center 1 and center 2 will be equal, or it will have something extra, which means that whatever is there in center 2, for example, let's say if you have N at center 2, you will have N here as well, okay? If you have P here, you will have P here as well. But that does not mean that if there is maybe T here, then there will be T here. You cannot say that, okay? So you know that C1 will definitely have everything that that C2 has, okay? That's what it means. So you can kind of think of it as C1 is C2 plus something more, okay? So let's look at the rules that we have until now. We have that C1 is this thing. We also know that you have the block of W and N. This is the other thing we know. Let's look at the third rule. The third rule says only one of the centers recycles plastic, and that center does not recycle glass. Okay, so there is only one that recycles plastic, and that center does not recycle glass. Now, I want you to think about this rule for a moment, okay? If it says that only one, right? Only one recycles, only one recycles plastic. Which one could that be, right? Could that be C1? Could that be C2? Could that be C3? Think of it like this, that if you were to put P in here, let's say you put P in center 2, then you definitely know that P is also going to be here, right? Because C1 is C2, definitely. Everything that's there in C2 is there in C1. So if you put P in center 2, definitely you'll have P in center 1 as well. And then you don't have only one because you have two. So you know for a fact that definitely, definitely that C2 does not have P. So let me just put this out here for you. C2 does not have P, okay? And that means P can either be in C1 or in C3, right? Now we kind of have the directions in the form of a diagram. We can now go ahead and look at the conditions given in the questions and solve the questions, adding them into this diagram. Question number 18. Right, let's get the diagram in and read the question. It says, which one of the following could be an accurate account of all the kinds of material recycled at each recycling center? Okay, so now you have the list of each center in here, center 1, center 2, and center 3, okay? And you are to see as to which one of these follows the rules, right? So out of the 4 options, one of them follows the rules, right? And the other 3 do not follow the rules, okay? So you're to pick the one that follows the rules, okay? So let's go through the options one by one and we'll see where they go wrong, okay? The moment we see something wrong, we know that that's not the answer. Let's start with option A. Okay, option A says center 1. Center 1, let's just write that down to see if that's okay or not. Let me write it down in maybe red. Okay, it's center 1 is N, P, and W. Center 2 is N, W. Okay, you can see here that N and W are here and W are here. Okay, so far so good. And then it says center 3, you have G, T, and W. Now what's the problem with this? The problem with the 3 here is that you have the W, but where's the N? You don't have the N here, right? So that's why A is not the answer. A is wrong, okay? So let's go ahead and look at what we can do with option B, okay? We take option B. It says center 1 is G, N, and T. Let's just write that down. So we have G, N, and T. Center 2 has G, N, and T. G, N, and T. Remember, I told you that it's not necessary that you need to have something here, right? You can even have a case when C1 and C2 are equal, and you have that in here, so that's okay, completely okay, right? So that is okay. Let's look at C3. It says N, P, and W. So you have N, P, and W. So hey, it follows all the rules. You have a P and you don't have a G. You have a W and an N. So this looks okay to me, right? So it looks like this is possible. It's accurate. So B looks like the answer, and it should be the answer. Let's just look at some of the other options to just confirm whether this is the right answer or not. Let's look at option C. Center 1 is, according to option C, G, N, W. Center 2 is G, and T. Well, there's something extra here. Not possible. This needs to be in here if it's in C2. So C is not the answer. Let us look at the option D. Option D says G, P, and T. Hey, that's wrong because when you have a P, you cannot have a G. Therefore, D is also not the answer. So the answer to this question, simple question, is B. Question number 19. Okay, which one of the following is a complete and accurate list of the recycling centers, any one of which could recycle plastic? Look, this question is asking you which one could recycle plastic. So out of the three centers, C1, C2, and C3, which ones could, right? The ones that could are basically the ones are not the ones that cannot, right? The ones that could recycle are the ones that are not the ones that cannot. You know that C2 cannot, that's what we saw, you cannot have P here. So basically out of these three, C1, C2, and C3, the one that cannot do it is C2. C2 cannot recycle. So you can take C2 off. That leaves us with C1 and C3, and both of these could recycle. And therefore the answer is the one that tells you C1 and C3. So the answer to this is D. So D is the correct answer. Okay? Well, question number 20. Okay, this says that if Center 2 recycles three kinds of material, then which one of the following material must Center 3 recycle? Look, if Center 2 recycles three kind of material, okay, and it means that definitely that is not P because P is not here. So that means P is not here. P is not here because if C2 is recycling three kinds of material, it means it's fixed. So whenever C2 recycles three kinds of material, right, at that point you know for sure that C1 is equal to C2 because there's no scope for us to add anything. So in this case you know that C1 and C2 are exactly the same. Whenever there are three in C2, it means C1 and C2 are the same. So it means that if this does not have P, then this also does not have P, which means that P definitely has to be at C3. Okay? So which material should C3 recycle? The answer is simple. That would be C. So the answer to this is 20, plastic, C. Question number 21. Right. Question number 21 says that if each recycling center recycles exactly three kinds of material, then which one could be true? Look, we just saw in the previous question that if all three are recycling three, that means even C2 is recycling all three. And if C2 is recycling all three, it means that in this case C1 is equal to C2, which means that C1 also does not have P. That means that C3 is the one that has P. So let me put P in here. Okay, so you put P inside here. And if there is P in here, if you have P in C3, it means that there is no G here. Okay, there's no G. The other thing is that when you look at the options, okay, there is nothing that only center 1 or only center 2 could recycle, because you see anything that is there here is also there here. Okay, so basically if there is anything here, you have that here. So basically everything that is there in C1 and C2 is shared by two centers, which means that there is nothing that only center 2 has. There is nothing that only center 1 has. So I immediately know that options A and C are wrong. Okay, let me strike them out because you cannot have options A and C because there is nothing that only center 1 or center 2 is recycling in this case. So I know that A is not the answer. I know that C is not the answer. So now let's look at option B, which says that only center 3 recycles newsprint. So that means I put N in here, okay? And that means that since only center 3 recycles newsprint, it means you don't have N here, you don't have N here. But hey, there's an important rule that whenever there is an N, there has to be a W, okay? Which means that you've got to have a W here. Now, likewise, I need to tell you that, hey, you cannot even have the W here because you cannot have it. If you have a W, then you should have the N, which means that now when you look at the positions C1 and C2, okay, you need to fill 3 positions in here. You have a total of 5 kinds of material, right? You have the materials that are wood, W, N, P, G, and T, right? You have these 5 materials, out of which you know that 3 cannot be used, and you want to fill 3 in here. Well, you can't do that because you need to have at least 3, because if you remove 3 from 5, that means basically you're left with just, you remove W, you remove N, you remove P, you have just 2 remaining to fill 3 spots. That can't happen, which means that even option C is not, even option B is not the right answer because you can't have that happening. So already I know that D has to be the right answer, but let's just go ahead and try it once so that we know what we're doing. Okay, let's go ahead and see what option D tells us. Okay, so we know that, okay, I erased some things off. We know that there is no P in here, there is no G here, and there is a P here. Now, is it possible for only scenario 3 to have 10? Let me put 10 in here. Yes, works quite okay. I put 10 in here. That means you don't have T here, don't have T here. That's what it means. Only scenario 3 recycles 10. So that means I can put in, if I have to fill 3 spots here, what could they be? You could use W, N, and G, W, N, and G. This works out, which means that yes, this could be true. So the answer is the option D. Question number 22. All right. It says that if center 3 recycles glass, then which one of the following kinds of material must center 2 recycle? Let's look at the diagram. Okay. And it says center 3 recycles glass. So let me put glass in here. Now what does this tell you? It tells you that there is no P in here because if there had been P, then there would have been no G, right? So since you have a G here, it means that there is no P. Now, if you don't have a P here and you don't have a P here, this means that you have the P in center 1. So let me just put that for you here. So you know that you have P in here and you know that there is no P here. Okay, so this place has to be blank for center 2, right? This place is basically blank, right? There's nothing here. And you know that there is no G here. You also know that C1 and C2 have the kind of relationship that if C1 does not have something, then C2 will also not have that. Because C1 has everything that C2 has, okay? So if C1 does not have G, it means that C2 also does not have G. Okay, now here's the point. You're looking at what must center 2 recycle. Okay, now what is the list of what you have? All the materials. You have W, you have N, you have G, you have P, and you have T. Okay, so out of the list for center 2, you know that you cannot use G, you cannot use P, and that leaves you with W, N, and T. Okay, and you need to put exactly 2 things in here. Remember, you see, any center can have either 2 or 3. In this case, center 2 cannot have 3 because you see this one position is blank, it's vacant, which means that center 2 has exactly 2. So out of these 3, right, we need to put in 2 in here, okay? And we need to see that is there any one out of these that will definitely be in here? Like if you put out of these 3, is there something that's certain to be in here? That will be our answer, okay? So let's see what the combinations are. You can either have W and N, or you can have W and T, or you can have T and N. Okay, let's try these one by one. Can we put W and N in here? Yes, you can. It works okay. Okay, this gives you exactly 2. Can you put W and T in here? W and T in here? No, you can't, because when you put W, you also need to get the N, which makes this total of 3, okay? Which means that when you put W and T together, it means it becomes a total of 3, but we want exactly 2. So this is not possible, okay? This is not possible. Let us look at the third possibility. Can you put T and N in here? Can you put T and N? Yes, you can. Remember one thing, that, if you have N, that does not mean you should have W. If you go back and read the directions, it says that any of the centers that recycles wood must recycle newsprint. But that does not mean that if something is recycling newsprint, then it should recycle wood. Okay, there's a direction to this, right? So when you actually see this diagram, it is actually in this direction, okay? So you know that you can have T and N. That's also a possibility, which means that we saw that there are 2 possibilities. You can either have W and N, or you can have T and N, okay? Now what is the common one between these 2? It is N, which means that you definitely know that center 2 must recycle N, so the answer is B. The last question of this set, question number 23. Okay, let's get the diagram and read the question. It says, if center 1 is the only recycling center that recycles wood, okay, that means I put W in here, and since C1 is the only center, it means that C2 and C3 do not have W, so let me write that down. So you know that there is no W here and there is no W here. The other thing that you know is that whenever there is a W, there is also an N. So I put this N down here, okay? Now, you know that C1 and C2, okay, C1 and C2 will have at least 2 in common, right? We'll have at least 2 in common. It is possible that maybe C2 might have 2 things and C3 may have 3 things. In that case, C1 is C2 plus something. But you definitely know that C1 and C2 have at least 2 things in common. We know in this case that W is not in common, right? So when I look at this part here, there is nothing in here. But that means definitely that you will have an N here, okay? And also, whatever is here will also be here, okay? That's something that's definitely going to happen. And if that's going to happen, right, it means that this cannot be P, right? Because if this were P, then this is also P, and P has to be in only one place, right? So you know that there is no P in here. Let's just put this in here. You know that there is no P in here, which means that P is in C3, okay? And if P is in C3, it means there is no G in center 3. So P is in C3 and there is no G in center 3. Okay, now here's the interesting thing. If there is no G in here, it means that G has to be either in this or in this. right? And if you put G in any one of these, it will come to the other as well. So you know for sure that in here, you're going to have a G and a G, okay? So now you have your diagram in place, okay? Now what's the question saying? This is what I hope you can understand, that by simply seeing one simple thing, like if center 1 is the only center that recycles wood, you can actually get all of these details, okay? That's an important point for you to remember, that one detail gives you many more details, right? So here you know that this block is vacant, okay? There's nothing in here, it's empty, and that for center 1 you have W, N, and G, okay? Now, let's look at what the question said. Then which one of the following could be a complete and accurate list of the material that one of the centers recycles? This does not tell you which one. It does not tell you which one. It just says that which one of these could be an accurate one for either C1, C2, or C3. Okay? So now you know what's there in C1 and C2. Let's see if we find that in here. C1 has three things, right? If you see C1 has three things, okay? You can see that C1 has 3, but none of the options has 3, which means that this is definitely not representative of C1, right? Because if it were C1, you would have had 3 things here, so obviously it's not representing C1. Do you find any option representing C2? Because C2 has N and G. Do you see N and G in here? No option gives you N and G, right? This means that the options, none of the options represents C1, okay? None of the options represents C2, which means that the only possibility is that it could represent C3, okay? Now the thing about C3 is that you know that C3 has P, but you don't know what else it has, right? So let's look for the option that has P, okay? Because that's the only thing you know about C. Hey, look at option A. It gives you P. This is the right answer. Because you know what? It's not asking us to what is an accurate list. It's asking you what could be an accurate list. So if you look at this, I can put a T in here. Let's say I put a T in here. Now this is an accurate list, right? This is telling you what C3 has. It could be P and T, and therefore the answer is A. It's a slightly difficult question, but you can give it some thought, attempt the question again. You can download the test from the link that I've given you in the description and try the questions again by yourself. Okay? Thank you.